Good morning, everyone. This is Heather Quick with the Quick Law Group, and I'm talking to you this morning about when going through a divorce, some top 3 things you should look at to determine if you want to keep the house. And I chose this topic because it seems to be something that we're asked about frequently, and there's never an easy answer, yes, you should, or no, you shouldn't. And these are some of the things that I think women can look at to determine if they do want the house. Because the majority of the time, speaking when individuals are going through a divorce, sometimes the house is the single largest asset. So when you're looking at that, the question becomes, do I keep it or not? Is it worth it? And what would be the reasons? Because there is and a lot of times I talk in generalizations, but that's because that's what we deal with. But I think there's just a common misperception that you always keep the house and you should always go for the house. You can't abandon the house, things like that. One, I want you to know there's no such thing as abandoning your house. So if there's a safety issue during a divorce, not a divorce, you need to get out. It's very difficult most of the time for individuals to stay in the house together while they're divorcing. It can be very unhealthy for the children as well. So just know that I don't believe there are very many standard, you must do rules during a divorce. It always does depend, which are lawyers' favorite answers. But we always talk about the house. And I've had in the past clients come to me, well, I started with another attorney. It wasn't working out. So here I am now. Please take our case. And they told me to take the house. So that's kind of why I say, well, what are your goals? Where do you want to be in 3 years? And what does the financial situation look at? So that's what we're going to look at. So the top 3 things. One is you need to look at its value. What is your equity situation in the house? Meaning, how much do you owe and how much is it potentially worth? And as we know, what Zillow says is great, what an appraisal says is great, but you need to know if a buyer is going to come to that door and buy it. And you're not going to know that until that happens. So, but we can give an estimate. We can determine, okay, there is, 100,000, 500,000 equity. It's paid off. So when you look at the house, that's one of the number one things we look at, because we've been through a period over the past 10 years where so many houses were underwater. It gives you limited options when you're thinking, I want to move forward with the divorce. What are we going to do with the house? Well, nobody wants it, and you're both going to end up in debt. So a lot of folks are still coming out of that. It just depends, and we need to see, what is it valued at? Do we think that the market, can bear the price we want for it, and how would we determine the division of the assets? So number one, what's the value? Meaning, what do we think we can get at fair market? And Zillow is a great place to start. A lot of times you'll see people go look at the tax records, property tax records. That's not the best thing to look at. You really want to look at what an appraisal is the most accurate, because that's what the bank's going to rely on to loan money based on the value of the home. So that is very important. But at least look at Zillow to give yourself an idea. And then you're going to have to find the mortgage statements and find out, what do we owe on it? Are we in a situation where it looks like there is some equity? And if we sell it, we're going to have a good bit of money to divide up. Now, number 2, and this may seem like a silly question, but do you even want to stay? All right. I have, as a homeowner myself and been in situations where we've sold houses, moved, there's a lot of attachment. There's a lot of emotional attachment to a home. And so I think it's important to ask, do you want to be there? I mean, have you been married 20 years? You built this house together, raised your children in this house, and you're so attached that you can't bear the thought of parting with it. But we need to talk about that, because if it's that important to you, we're going to have to work through what that's going to look like for you in 3 to 5 years. So you really need to ask yourself that. Now, some people are like, I am so sick of this house. I never liked it. We didn't do what I wanted to do with it. I can't wait to get rid of it. He can have it. Good. Let's be honest about that. Don't take advice to keep a house that you don't even want. So that is important from my perspective. I think that you need to really understand if you want it or not. So that's number 2. And all of these evaluations come together because we're going to then take everything as we look at it together and then make the final decision. Now, another thing, and it's within whether you want it or not, and it happens to be when the third thing, though, is with children. Well, no, actually, I'm going to put this in number 2 because number 3 is very important as well. But, if you want the house, you have children. Okay, what's your school district? Sometimes you may be in a house situation and your children are in private school. So they don't even go to the public school they're zoned in. Well, one of the things we need to look at and you need to seriously understand is what if private school is not going to be an option? One, either your husband's not going to agree to pay it, you don't have the money to pay it if he doesn't agree to pay it. And that may be out of spite, that may be because he can't afford it with the divorce, but either way, and then, is the judge going to make him pay or not if this ends up going all the way to trial? And those are things your attorney can help you look at. That's going to come down to financial. Because you can always, in a settlement agreement, you can agree to a lot of things. Private school is a difficult thing to enforce if the money's not there. And that's an important thing to consider because we don't want to go into a mediation, say compromising on one thing for the issue of private school without the understanding that it's not 100% always enforceable for them to pay that if they prove they don't have the money. So I just like to talk about that because that's a big deal. And if suddenly you're stuck in a house that really you were somewhat attached to, but you didn't consider the possibility of your children having to go to the local school, you're going to be upset in 2 or 3 years if now you're in a situation where they have to go to their schools and it's not where you would prefer to be. You would have rather moved earlier when you had more of an opportunity. So number 3 on the evaluation of looking at the house, whether or not to keep the house, is can you afford it? Do you even want to afford it? So, because here's the scenario, and I'm going to talk in big numbers because sometimes it helps really clearly identify what we're talking about. You're in a $5 million house, and let's just say there's a couple $1 million of equity, meaning if you sell it, and that's again, if you have a buyer, you sell it, you're going to have, you see yourself in a valuable situation with that asset. But to maintain a $5 million home, $30,000-$40,000 a year in taxes, let alone whatever the mortgage payment is. And then let's think about a large home, the electricity, pool maintenance, yard maintenance. What if something goes wrong and you have to fix it? The larger the home, the roof, water heater, plumbing issues, all those things. And I'm not going to get into all of them because I don't even know all of them, except I know lots of things can go wrong. And generally, the bigger the house, the more expensive the repairs become. But I'm just talking your day-to-day maintenance, which is mowing the lawn, keeping the pool clean, keeping the house clean, for heaven's sakes. The larger the house, the more you're going to have to keep clean. Are you going to have the money for a housekeeper, or is that going to fall on you now afterwards? And this is huge because we really need to look at that. I've known women who have fought really hard for a house, ended up in that situation, and then they didn't consider the expenses on a monthly basis of the house. Can end up in a really bad situation of foreclosure, having to go through bankruptcy. It's just, there are ways to avoid that and plan for it. And that's what I'm talking about. That's what we do at the Quick Law Group for the divorce. And that's what any attorney should do for you, is help you plan where you're going to be in 3 to 5 years. And that includes the house. That's just a huge decision. If you can't afford it, then you need to seriously think about, well, maybe I want it and just put it right on the market. Well, go ahead and let's do that now. Let's see if it will sell during the marriage. And then we can have all that liquid assets in the bank waiting for the court to distribute it. It's just a terrible situation to fight really hard for something that then you can't afford to maintain. How are we going to know if you're going to be able to maintain it? Well, we look at alimony. What is the amount, how much alimony you're going to get? And is it going to cover the mortgage payment and all the expenses? And so if that's what it's going to cover, how are you going to pay for food and gas in your car? There's so many expenses that we go through with on the financial affidavit. And your attorney will always do that, and really the paralegals help you put that together so that you have an accurate idea. A lot of times we use the CDIF, Certified Divorce Planners, Financial Planners, CDFP, but they have a licensure, but it's basically budgeting. But let's look at what you're going to have. And if you're going to have investments, how much income is that going to produce for you, so that we can really establish if you take this house based on the alimony, that this will be the alimony that you need and child support to make that happen and sustain this level of living. So those are things that are just so very important to consider with the house. So again, the top 3 things that you need to look at, and look at with your attorney and your financial planner, and within budgeting. And of course, this is all before you go to mediation, because you want to have an idea. What we do in our office is, in mediation, before we ever go in, we know this is our high end, this is our low end, this is what we'll walk away with during those negotiations. So we're prepared. There's nothing that really surprises us. We prepare the clients for what we see. This is where I think this case will settle. Either they're going to come in within that range, or maybe not. Maybe they're just going to be very greedy, more difficult. They don't want to settle. And this is the best range for you to settle. So we're going to know all of these things before then. Early on, you really want to plan your strategy of what you want and why. So the top 3 things, excuse me, I don't think I've had enough coffee this morning. The top 3 things to look at when you're trying to decide if you want the house during the divorce is, 1, what's its value? Is there any equity in it? Is there a debt in it? And is there a reason that it makes sense to keep it? Those are some important things. And number 2, do you really want it? Is that the place you want to live, either on your own or with your children, or your children are grown and you want it specifically for them to come back? Many times in this, I'm going to do through the 3 and then I'll go back to that. And then number 3 is, can you afford it? What is your monthly nut, so to say? What is your monthly expenses? What is that going to be if you keep the house, and what other income are you going to have that's going to help you make that happen? A lot of times during a divorce, I think women do this more. That's what I see. They keep the house, not maybe for themselves, but for their children or their grandchildren. And I will tell you, I think this is perceived as what they perceive everybody else wants. During a divorce, it's time to think about yourself and really look at, what do you want? Because I need to tell you that they're not going to be there as much as your children love you. Most likely than not, if you're keeping it for them for their holidays, they're not keeping it. They're not going to come help you mow the grass, clean the pool, fix things when it's broken. And frankly, they may not care. They may say, you know what, this Christmas we're going on vacation, Mom. Love you, but we're not going to be there, because you've most likely raised independent children and they are going to move on with their lives. So I would just ask you to dig deep. If you're keeping it for reasons that might not be in your best interest, this is the time. You gotta look at yourself, because you're the only one taking care of you now. It's a divorce, and that's a liberating thing, and it's a wonderful thing. So I don't want it to be a depressing thing. I just want you to think about it and be realistic. So many times I see women make choices based on their kids, or spend all their money on their children, and then they're broke. And they're broke, and the divorce is over, and your husband has gone along and he's earned more money, and he's told the kids no. And guess what? They still love him, they still love you, and at the end of the day, they might have to do it on their own. But you need to recognize, if you do not have a job that is going to replenish your income, make choices based on what's best for you. And when mom's good, everybody else is good, and that's really the truth. And it's very hard sometimes for women, because there's so many emotions that are happening with the divorce. It's easy to focus on what I want to do for my children in the future, and the house is something I want to do for them. So, and if they say, well, I want you to keep that for me, well, they're kind of being very selfish. So I would look at that too. But that's like a whole nother video and therapy on that, I can tell you. So thank you all so much. If you have questions, please contact the Quick Law Group. Go to our website. We have a lot of resources available for you related to answering some frequently asked questions with videos. But you can also come and see someone in our office. And, as we move forward in the representation, these are the kind of questions that we're going to do. And hopefully this is helpful to you if you're contemplating divorce, or if you're in divorce and represented by someone else and they haven't asked you these questions. These are the things you need to think about, and bring that to them and have that discussion, so you can make educated decisions and be informed. This is your life moving forward, and you're moving into a situation where you are going to have a lot more control and responsibility. in the relationship for your finances and property if you didn't have that before. And that's empowering. It's exciting where you're moving to. So educate yourself and ask for help with the resources you need to put yourself in a better situation. Thank you. Have a wonderful Wednesday, and look forward to your comments. We will reply as we can. Thank you so much.